Jake, after 17 years, we're eliminating your position. That's all my boss said. No buildup, no apology, just cold corporate detachment. Please clean out your desk by the end of the day. My name's Jake Wilson. I'm 54 years old, and up until that Monday morning, I was a senior systems analyst at Meridian Technologies, right in Columbus, Ohio. I'd been there nearly 2 decades. From the days of dial-up internet to full-on cloud migration, I was the guy holding the IT department together. I'd seen 3 CEOs come and go, watched them ride in with bold promises and exit with golden parachutes. Meanwhile, I stayed, trained every new hire, recovered every lost file, worked through weekends and holidays, not because I had to, but because I cared. And I never once asked for a promotion or even a simple thank you. So when Daniel, my boss, called me into his office and I saw Vanessa from HR already sitting there, I didn't need to hear what he was about to say. I already knew. The air had shifted weeks ago. The writing was on the wall. I understand completely, I said just once. Then I walked out. No scene, no begging, no anger, just quiet acceptance. I returned to my desk and started packing. The silence was deafening. Around me, the younger employees, most of them coders I'd trained myself, kept glancing over, then quickly looking away. News travels fast in an office, especially when someone like me gets axed. They were good kids, hardworking, but they had no idea what was really inside our systems. The custom scripts I wrote, the nested admin credentials hidden 3 layers deep, the legacy architecture that still ran half the back-end operations. I'd built all of that, quietly, thoroughly. I grabbed the family photo from my desk, the coffee mug my son had made for me back in high school, the little cactus I'd kept alive for 17 years under the worst lighting known to man. Bethany from marketing stopped by. Her face was tight with concern. "Jake, I just heard. This is ridiculous. You practically built this place." I gave her a small shrug. "Companies change direction. But without warning? After everything you've done?" Her voice was rising. "Bethany," I said gently, "it's fine." It wasn't fine, but I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. As I headed out, Daniel stepped out of his office. Didn't say a word. No goodbye. No handshake. Just watching. Making sure I actually left. What no one in that building seemed to understand was just how important I'd become. Not because I was a genius or some tech wizard, but because I was thorough. I documented everything. Set up audit trails. Secure protocols. Years ago, during a company scandal, legal asked me to implement systems to detect unauthorized access. I did. And yes, I kept off-site copies per their request. They forgot. I didn't. I sat in my car for a while, just looking at the 12-story glass and steel tower that had been my second home for nearly half my life. My security badge had been renewed 16 times. Now it was gone. I started the engine, drove home. They had no idea what Wednesday was going to bring. Meridian was small when I joined, just 2 floors in a suburban office park. My daughter Olivia had just started kindergarten. She's in grad school now. The company grew, and I grew with it. Turned down better offers, more money, flashier titles, because I believed in loyalty. My wife Andrea used to joke the servers were my second family. She wasn't wrong. I knew everything. The systems, the data flow, the backdoor fixes the execs never even knew existed. My code held that place together through 3 acquisitions and more failed software overhauls than I could count. Then Daniel came along, 5 years ago, fresh MBA, buzzwords guy, started calling our department IT resources instead of, people. He wanted efficiency, digital transformation, wanted everything faster, leaner, cheaper, the usual playbook. At first I tried to explain how years of growth and patchwork systems made things more complex than they looked on paper. But he didn't care. He wanted results, not context. 6 months ago, he brought in a consultant, Jason Phillips. Expensive suits, Stanford degree plastered all over his LinkedIn. They were always in meetings, always speaking quietly when I passed by. 3 months ago, I started noticing small changes to my access credentials. Nothing huge, just a few revoked admin controls, things that didn't make sense. I didn't raise a fuss. I documented everything. You seem distracted lately, Andrea said one night as we sat on the porch. Just changes, I said, sipping my beer. Nothing I haven't seen before. But it felt different. I was being phased out, excluded from upgrade plans, removed from email threads. Projects I normally ran were handed off to junior staff. Then I found the memo, a company-wide announcement about modernizing AT, only I'd never received it. Someone had deliberately skipped me. It announced a total restructure, new leadership, Jason Phillips at the top. My name? Nowhere on the chart. And that same day, while running a standard system scan, one of those routines nobody else bothered with anymore, I caught something weird. Regular payments to a vendor I didn't recognize. Apex Solutions Group. Tiny charges at first, then more and more. Monthly. I checked the vendor profile, registered just last year. Business address? A UPS store. Seriously, the payments were marked as authorized. The amounts were small enough not to trigger alarms, but they were growing every single month. I didn't say anything, just made copies. Logged everything. Sometimes the quiet guy in the corner sees everything because everyone assumes he sees nothing. The morning after I was let go, I sat in my home office. No alarm, no commute, just silence. Andrea brought me a cup of coffee, set it down without saying a word. I'm running to the store, she said eventually. Need anything? I shook my head. After she left, I reached into the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a flash drive. One of several. Technically, I wasn't supposed to have company data, but years ago, when legal asked for a secure off-site backup system during an insider threat investigation, I explained what I needed. They signed off on it, then forgot. I didn't. I plugged in the drive and opened the files, internal emails, meeting notes, financial records that a regular employee should never have access to. But I had them, and there it was. Nearly $1.8 million in payments to Apex Solutions Group, over 18 months. The approval trail led straight to Brian Wilcox, our CFO. I cross-checked dates, spreadsheets, invoices. The payments lined up perfectly with our software license renewals, but the amounts? Inflated, sometimes 15%, sometimes 20%. Just enough to slip under the radar. The real kicker? Apex Solutions Group was registered under a guy named Thomas Wilcox, Brian's brother-in-law. They were using a fake company to skim money off the top of legitimate expenses, hiding in plain sight. I leaned back in my chair, not angry, just focused. For 17 years, I was the fixer, the quiet guy who made things work, and they tossed me aside like I was obsolete. That was their mistake. My phone buzzed. A text from Steven, a junior analyst I'd mentored for the past 2 years. Sorry about yesterday. Total BS what they did. Phillips is already moving into your old office. I stared at the message for a moment, then set the phone down. The pieces were in place now. It all made sense. Daniel and the CFO needed me gone before anyone connected the dots. They figured the paper trail would vanish with me, that I was just some aging IT guy who didn't understand modern finance. They had no idea what I'd been holding on to. I opened my email and started typing a message to the board of directors. Short, direct. Here's what I found. Here's who approved it. But then I paused. Too easy to dismiss. Too easy to spin as the bitter ramblings of a recently fired employee. No, I needed more than a warning. I needed leverage. And the right moment. Wednesday. The quarterly board meeting, financial reports, bonus approvals, all the executives in one room. Perfect timing. I deleted the draft, closed the laptop, and walked to the living room window. Outside, the neighborhood looked the same. Calm, suburban, familiar. But inside me, something had shifted. I smiled for the first time in days. Wednesday morning, I parked across the street from Meridian's headquarters. Same building, same revolving doors. Just not for me anymore. In the passenger seat, my laptop was open. Logged into an email account I'd created years ago for internal penetration testing. Looked like a Meridian address, but it wasn't in the main directory, completely invisible to standard audits. At 9:15 a.m., on the dot, I made my first move. Subject line, financial irregularities, urgent review needed. I sent it directly to Daniel. The message was precise, just enough to raise alarm. A summary of Apex payments, no accusations, no mention of the brother-in-law. Just concern. If Daniel was involved, he'd panic. If he wasn't, he'd investigate. Either way, I'd get answers. By 9:45, my phone rang. Daniel, I let it go to voicemail. Jake, we need to discuss your email immediately. Call me back. No thanks. At 10:30, another ping. Email from Vanessa in HR. Mr. Wilson, we've received a concerning communication from you that potentially violates your separation agreement. Please cease all contact with Meridian employees. Any further communication may result in legal action. That was cute. I hadn't signed a separation agreement. At noon, I headed to my bank and opened a safe deposit box I hadn't touched in years. Inside was an older flash drive, less complete, but full of critical early documents. Security logs, access change records, admin permissions. One file stood out, a record from 18 months ago showing Brian Wilcox personally requesting expanded access to the financial systems, the exact moment Apex payments started. Back home, my phone was blowing up. 3 missed calls. Daniel, Vanessa, and Jason Phillips. Interesting. I checked my personal inbox. Stephen had messaged again. Jake, they're saying you sent some crazy email about financial fraud. Phillips called an emergency meeting. Everyone's talking. They're pulling your access to everything, even old records. What's going on? Poor kid. Caught in the storm and didn't even know it. I replied simply, don't get involved, Stephen. Just watch. At 3 p.m., my landline rang, a number I hadn't used for business in years. I picked up, said nothing. Jake, it's Brian Wilcox. His voice was calm, practiced. We should talk about your concerns. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Is that what you call it? Look, he continued, transition periods are always rocky. If you have questions about company finances, there are proper channels. The board, I cut him off. They don't need to be bothered with operational details, he said quickly. Why don't we meet? Just you and me. We can clear this up. Sorry, I'm busy tomorrow. Jake, he said, the tone dropping, you're making a serious mistake. We can make this right. Severance, references, whatever you need. Goodbye, Brian. Click. Within 10 minutes, another email arrived. Vanessa again. This time, my severance had doubled. Attached was an NDA, complete confidentiality, full release. Now they were scrambling. But they still thought this was about money. They had no idea what was coming. Thursday morning brought something I hadn't felt in a while. Clarity. All night I'd been digging, going deeper than before, following every trail I'd once ignored. Turns out Apex wasn't the first. 3 years ago, not long after Brian became CFO, another pattern emerged. Consulting payments to Lakeside Business Solutions, inflated invoices, vague services, minimal output. I traced the ownership, Patricia Wilcox, Brian's wife, same game, different name. I dug further, email archives, old logs. Daniel knew. He facilitated some of it. In return, his department got increased budgets while others faced cuts. He'd been brought in because the previous IT director had started asking questions. Jason Phillips, hired under sketchy procurement practices. No vetting, no RFP, no bidding process. His real job wasn't modernizing anything. It was eliminating me, the one guy who might catch the patterns. Over 3 years, they'd siphoned off nearly $4.3 million. I compiled everything: spreadsheets, documents, email threads, vendor registrations. Then I did something they wouldn't expect. I called Robert Chen, board member, semi-retired, the one person who'd ever asked smart questions in meetings. He picked up on the second ring. Jake Wilson, he said, long time. Heard you left Meridian. Not by choice. A pause. This about why Brian and Daniel have been sweating through their shirts since yesterday? Probably. He laughed. Always figured you knew where the bodies were buried. Can we meet? An hour later, we sat on a bench in a quiet park 3 miles from HQ. I handed him an envelope. Inside was a printed summary and a flash drive. I'm not looking for my job back, or hush money. I just want the right people to see the truth. He looked me over. Why come to me? Because you actually read audit reports. He smiled, nodded. There's an emergency board session tomorrow. Finance committee review. Honey, convenient timing, he pocketed the envelope. If this checks out, Jake, there will be serious consequences. I'm counting on it. That afternoon, two competing firms sent me offers. Senior roles, big titles, huge bonuses. Word had gotten out about my sudden availability. I ignored them. This wasn't about starting over. This was about finishing what they started. That night, while the city wound down, I sat alone in my home office. The soft hum of my personal server was the only sound. Using a set of credentials that should have been revoked, sloppy oversight, Jason, I accessed Meridian's email servers one last time. Everything was still open. It had rushed to shut off front-end access, but no one had touched the legacy systems I'd built. No one even knew about half of them. The backdoors weren't nefarious. They were tools. Tools for emergencies, for monitoring, for protection. And this was an emergency. I composed one final message. Set it to be delivered to every board member at 8 a.m. Friday morning, just as they'd be preparing to approve Q2 bonuses. Subject line, before you approve Q2 bonuses, read this. Attached, my full report, vendor records, payment logs, approval emails, ownership connections, the whole scheme, traced and time-stamped. Then I logged out, shut everything down, and went to bed. Friday morning arrived with crisp blue skies, October sun pouring through our living room window. I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the neighborhood come to life. No alarm, no tie, no briefcase, just waiting. At 8:01 a.m., right on schedule, my email was delivered. At 8:17, my phone started ringing. One unknown number after another. Board members, assistants, legal reps. I ignored them all. At 9 Mas, the Emergency Finance Committee meeting began. Robert Chen would be there, watching the faces as the report made its rounds. At 9:32, Stephen texted me, "Police are here. Wilcox and Daniel being questioned in separate rooms. Phillips looks sick. What did you do?" I didn't reply. The wheels were already turning, right on cue. At 10 euros, my home phone rang again. Different number this time. I answered. "Mr. Wilson, this is Patricia Graves, General Counsel for Meridian Technologies. Go ahead. We need you to come in immediately to discuss the information you provided to the board. I'm available by phone. This really requires an in-person conversation." "No," I interrupted, calm, firm. "It doesn't." A pause. "Mr. Wilson, the board is taking this extremely seriously. Several executives have already been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. They would appreciate your cooperation moving forward." "I've cooperated fully," I replied. "Everything I know is in that report. Everything I have is backed up and secured in multiple locations. If anything happens to me or my family," I added, "copies go to the SEC, IRS, and 3 national newsrooms." Silence on the other end. "We understand," she said finally. I hung up. I drove 20 miles outside Columbus to a small diner off the highway, had lunch, took my time. While I sat there, my phone buzzed with news alerts. Meridian Technologies executives under investigation for financial misconduct. Sources confirm internal fraud probe at major Ohio-based tech firm. No names yet, but they were coming. At 2 p.m., Robert Chen called. "It's a bloodbath," he said flatly. "Wilcox confessed as soon as we showed him your report. He's trying to pin everything on Daniel. Says he was pressured. Daniel's denying it all. Phillips is pretending he was just a clueless consultant. The board's not buying any of it. All 3 are suspended. Initial audits estimate at least $4.5 million diverted over 3 years. Maybe more." I nodded silently. I'd been close. "Jake," Robert continued, "the board wants to talk to you about coming back. Not to your old role," he added. "They're creating a new one. Chief Security Officer, full executive status, reporting directly to the board." I didn't say anything at first. I had expected something like this, but hearing it out loud still caught me off guard. "I'll think about it," I said. That evening, I told Andrea everything, start to finish. Every email, every document, every step I'd taken. She listened without interrupting. When I was done, she asked the only question that mattered. "What do you want to do?" It stopped me. I hadn't really thought about that. The revenge part, the justice, was complete. The men who'd pushed me out were being pushed out themselves, probably facing prison time. And now, they wanted me back? Could I really walk into that building again? After 17 years of loyalty, only to be tossed out like outdated hardware? Did I want to return? I need time to decide, I told her. Later that night, I opened LinkedIn for the first time in ages. No profile photo, no activity, just a bare account. I posted a single update. Never burn bridges. Just let them collapse under the weight of their own greed. Within minutes, former colleagues began messaging me. Some I hadn't spoken to in years. Offers came in, invitations to speak at conferences, interview requests. The quiet systems guy had suddenly become a name. Monday morning, I put on a suit I hadn't worn in years. Classic navy, barely wrinkled, still hanging in the back of the closet where I'd left it. I drove to Meridian's headquarters. As I entered the lobby, the same security guard who used to wave me in with a distracted nod did a double take. Then he stood up and said, "Welcome back, Mr. Wilson," like I was royalty returning from exile. He printed a visitor badge with a level of care I'd never seen before. The elevator ride to the executive floor was smooth, quiet. I'd never had a reason to visit that level before. Now, I was expected in the boardroom. 10 board members sat around a long, polished conference table. Robert Chen gave me a subtle nod as I stepped inside. The interim CEO, previously the COO, looked tense but composed. "Mr. Wilson," she began, "thank you for coming. The situation you've brought to light is unprecedented." I said nothing. She continued, "The extent of the fraud appears worse than initially reported. The forensic team has traced nearly $5.2 million in diverted funds, and criminal charges are in motion." Still, I waited. Robert cleared his throat. "Jake, the board has unanimously voted to create a new executive role, Chief Information Security Officer. You would report directly to the board with full privileges. We'd like to offer you the position." I stepped forward, placed a folder on the table, and slid it toward her. "Inside are my conditions," I said. "Non-negotiable." She opened it, scanned the document, and raised her eyebrows. "Full audit authority across all departments," she read aloud. "Independent budget, veto power on financial and technology initiatives." She looked up. "This is highly unusual." "So was embezzling $5.2 million, I replied. "That happened because no one was watching. Now someone will be." Silence. I let it hang. "You have until noon," I said, turning to leave. "I have other offers." As I reached the door, Robert asked quietly, "Jake, did you plan this? All of it?" I paused. "I didn't plan to be fired after 17 years, I said. "Everything after that was just me doing what I've always done, identifying vulnerabilities and implementing security measures." Then I walked out. At 11:47 a.m., my phone rang. They'd accepted every condition. 6 months later, I sat in a corner office overlooking the Columbus skyline. My name was on the door. Jake Wilson, Chief Information Security Officer. The view was new. The chair was more comfortable. But the mindset? Still the same. Fix problems. Protect the system. Stay invisible until it matters. Brian Wilcox had pled guilty to multiple charges of fraud. Because he cooperated, he'd get a reduced sentence. Still significant. Daniel was fighting the charges, insisting he didn't know what Brian was doing. Despite the evidence, Jason Phillips had fled to Brazil, but he was being extradited. The company had recovered most of the money, enough to avoid lasting damage. Stephen, the junior analyst I once mentored, now ran day-to-day operations for the IT team. I'd promoted him myself. He had potential. He just needed someone to see it. A soft knock on the door. Andrea stepped in, smiling. "Ready for lunch?" I nodded and grabbed my jacket. As we walked through the IT floor, conversations briefly quieted. Not out of fear, out of respect. These people knew the story. They knew I could have brought the whole company crashing down. But I didn't. I saved it. Because that's what I do. In the elevator, Andrea squeezed my hand. "Happy?" she asked. I thought for a moment. The rage that burned in me after that Monday morning had faded. What remained wasn't joy, exactly. It was something quieter, stronger, satisfaction. Closure. I'm good, weren't I said. Outside, the autumn sun was warm on our faces. As we walked toward a nearby restaurant, my phone buzzed. A message from Robert Chen. Board approved your security budget increase. Unanimous vote. I smiled, slightly. No arguments, no debates. Just trust. Andrea noticed my expression. What is it? Nothing, I said, sliding the phone back into my pocket. Just thinking about bridges. Yeah? Some collapse under their own weight, I said. But others, once repaired, become stronger than they ever were before. I'd rebuilt this one. Strong, clean, secure, the right way. I wasn't just back. I was different now. Positioned, empowered, unignorable. The role of Chief Information Security Officer wasn't ceremonial. I made sure of that. Every department now had audit checkpoints. Every executive decision involving technology or finance passed through me, whether they liked it or not. I didn't micromanage. I didn't need to. I'd built systems to watch the watchers, and it worked. Security incidents dropped. Budget leaks dried up. The IT department, once buried under outdated processes, became proactive, efficient, respected. And not out of fear, but because there was finally structure, standards, leadership. Stephen blossomed under the pressure. Where once he hesitated, now he led. He ran operations meetings with confidence, pushed smart ideas, caught bugs before they became outages. I'd made the right choice. One Friday, as we wrapped up our weekly systems review, he lingered in my office. Can I ask you something? He said. Sure. Back when they pushed you out, were you already planning to take them down? I looked at him for a long moment. No, I said, but I knew how to, if I had to. He nodded, then smiled. Glad you did. So was I. Outside the company, word had spread. Security blogs, tech podcasts, business columns. The quiet analyst who exposed executive fraud became a mini legend. I got invitations to speak at panels, even a few requests for interviews, which I declined. I wasn't interested in fame, just impact. One morning as I walked into the office, I passed a younger employee I didn't recognize. He straightened his posture when he saw me, eyes wide. Mr. Wilson, he said, I just wanted to say, your story's why I applied here. I smiled, shook his hand, and kept walking. At home, life settled into something peaceful. Andrea and I made time for long walks, movie nights, weekends away. Our daughter Olivia visited often from grad school, eager to talk tech, politics, and her research. She'd heard everything by now, how her dad took on 3 executives and won without shouting, suing, or slamming doors. One afternoon, she sat with me on the back porch and said, So what's next? Next? I asked. Yeah, you've rebuilt everything. What's left? I thought for a moment. Now, I said, I build what should have been built the first time. She nodded, understanding more than she let on. Weeks later, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened. It was Jason Phillips. Jake, he said, sounding exhausted. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I just wanted to say, I was wrong. About everything. Pause. You were the only one who actually gave a damn about doing things the right way. And I helped push you out. I regret it. Another pause. I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know. I didn't save the message, but I didn't delete it either. Just let it sit, like a fossil from another life. The final audit came in one bright July morning. The total, $5.87 million, recovered or accounted for. It was over. Officially. The board sent me a plaque, sleek, minimal, engraved with one line. For protecting not just our systems, but our integrity. It sat on my shelf next to the coffee mug my son had made me years ago. Andrea walked in, reading it. You gonna hang that? No, I said, not yet. You proud? I looked at her, thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the fraud, the silence, the methodical rebuild. Yeah, I said, not of how it ended, but of how I responded. She kissed my cheek. That's what matters. That night, I logged on to LinkedIn one more time. Same profile, still quiet. I added one more post. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to fight to win. Just outlast them. And when the system breaks, be the one they turn to for repairs. Dozens of reactions, messages, comments, but I didn't respond. I'd said what I needed to say. The rest could speak for itself.